What is up, everyone? Welcome to another edition of the Renegade Roundtable. I'm Jeff Kirby. We got Caleb with us.
What's up?
And you can't see him because he is having technical difficulties with his camera, but we do have the great Jesse Marshall on with us today. How are you doing today?
I promise it's actually me. It's not an imposter. It's the real one. You're just going to have to take my word for it. I don't know if there's like some kind of special quiz we can give to make sure that it, I don't know. It's good to be here, gentlemen. It's always nice to talk hockey in the summer.
Yeah, and obviously, as you can see, it's kind of funny that we don't have that he does have his camera on. So it's kind of, if you don't know what he looks like, well, first off, you should go and follow him on Twitter at jmarshfof. But yeah, if you want to go see what he looks like, go do that. Go follow him on Twitter, and then you'll definitely be able to do that.
Yeah. That photo is a couple years old, so just imagine just with less hair. And then you get a good modern version of me.
Jared in the comments says, "What's up, guys? How you been? We're doing phenomenal, especially knowing the fact that we have football today in less than an hour now. Or no, in 2 hours. I'm losing my mind. So quick disclaimer for you, Jesse. I am very new into the Penguins. And when I mean by very new, I mean I just recently started to watch them during this playoff series against the Islanders.
I love that.
So honestly, we do blame it on Jeff for the reason they lost.
That's fair. All right. I like it.
So
What spurned you to do it this year? Like, what was the thing that like got you to go now?
The fact that we started up the Renegade Roundtable, and
Good reason.
I knew Caleb and Stone, who's not with us today, both like the Penguins, and I didn't want to necessarily limit the show to just something that we all know, which was Steelers, and so I figured you have two of the three co-hosts who really like talking hockey and talking Penguins hockey. I figured, well, I might as well hop on board and start learning.
There's never a wrong time to get into hockey, but I always like to figure out what it is that,
And
it's a weird sport. It's a weird sport. So,
and it's nice for me too, because I live in the Cleveland area, so it's not that far of a drive for me to want to go to. If I want to go to a game, I can.
Yeah, it's not too bad.
But yeah, so this will definitely be a Caleb carried interview here, but I'll try to chime in when I can. I know Caleb definitely has some questions for you as he's in his Pittsburgh Penguins gear.
As always.
Well, typically it's the
I'm in my Pirate stuff or my Penguin stuff always.
God bless you for the Pirates part. I don't. Baseball is the thing that I know the least about in this world. So I'm cruising along. Well, I'm happy where I'm at. I support the Pirates from afar, though.
I'm in a situation where I am actually, well, another thing too is I've adapted to the Pirates because of this. But I've naturally, my whole life, have been now, what should I call them now? The Cleveland Guardians fan. So that has been something that I've been having to deal with for the last couple weeks. And boy, oh boy, that has been interesting, to say the least.
People have been very happy about that.
You said what?
I said it sounds like people have been very happy about that, and all the conversations have been very measured and not angry at all.
Definitely. But yeah, Caleb, if you want, you can go ahead and we can get this thing rocking and rolling.
Sounds good. All right, so my first question would be, what do you think that Hextall's going to do about our goalie situation? Do you think we're going to roll into camp coming up with just Jari and DeSmith? Do you think he's going to make a move for someone, a veteran goalie? There's not many out on the market left, so it's really just going to be a trade at this point. And so I kind of don't want him to overpay for somebody. So I'd hope it's just a confusing situation. And what do you think he's going to do about it?
I think that, despite the PR, I guess, sort of answer that we've heard from him, over the course of the last couple months, I do think it's a position that they did at least attempt to upgrade. I do think there's legitimacy to them, for instance, having at least had a moderate discussion. an inquiry about like a Darcy Kemper. But when you look at the price that actually got paid there and the value that was given up to acquire him, they just weren't in it. They were never in that, right? Like that was not a situation where they were, they weren't going to be able to swing up. They're not going to trade any prospect at this point. I think, noting how bare the cupboard is and how ugly of a situation, the prospect depth is at this point. That's just not something that they're really looking at doing. So I think there were some deals that they got priced out of, just on sheer cost and the reality of like life in a salary cap world for them. And I think that there were other deals that, maybe via trade that didn't pan out now. But I think the thing is, at the end of the day, and you mentioned, having to do it via trade, when goaltending becomes a necessity for teams, prices change, right? So what I mean by that is you catch somebody in a situation with, they have injuries, they end up like the Penguins last year where both their starter and their backup aren't available. That's when moves can get made. So I guess my long answer to this is to get to this point of an answer. I don't think Ron Hextall is done with this yet. I don't think that this is something that has to be accomplished right now because this tandem won the division last year.
Yes.
Right. Okay. So you're going into it like I don't think that either one of them are going to be worse. Right. So you could conceivably expect somewhat of a similar output, probably even a little bit of a better output. I mean, the question is do you believe in the longevity of it? Do you believe in its ability to carry you to a Stanley Cup? I don't think they do. I think they think there's alternatives to that out there, but the answer to it may not come until Christmas or New Year's or sometime beyond that, depending on when the need becomes available or when the environment sort of dictates that sort of trade can be made.
It's starting to look like we're going to roll into camp with Jari and DeSmith, and this is going to be some team selling off in January, and we can pick up their scraps and take a rental from that point on. Like, because we don't have the cap space to go out and get anybody, and we can't overpay because, like you said, there's not much to overpay because we don't have much.
No, when you only have one comma in your cap space, that's bad.
Yeah.
That's never good. One comma is never good. 121,000, I think now after Zach Aston Reese has been signed. So, it's one of those things that I think that around the league, and I haven't talked to a ton of people, but I have a buddy of mine who worked with the Dallas organization who says that from his perspective and the things that he's heard, the bloom, I guess you'll call it, is not off Tristan Jarry's rose from a league-wide perspective. There's still people that would take him happily and put him in their organization. And I think that, should a move get made, it's rare to see goalie for goalie trades, right? But I think there's other things that would have to happen for the Penguins to facilitate a deal, including, potentially having to move a guy like a Marcus Pettersson, and that's just one example of any number of players that have a cap impact that they could jettison to make a hockey trade. But I'm not ruling it out. I think just because despite what they've said, I think they do view it as a need.
All right. I actually have a question, and I'm going back a little bit. Caleb looks shocked. He's like, wow, you actually have a question. I want to go back real quick. I want to go back to the playoff series against the Islanders. And obviously me not knowing what the hell is going on, I just see people slapping the puck around. But what actually kind of went wrong in that series? Because I see we gave up, what was it? As I lost my spot where I was at, we gave up, we gave up 5 goals, 4 goals, 4. So it's like, what went wrong in that?
So here's, I think, like the really frustrating part about this, okay? Before the series started, and I don't say this to toot my own horn, I think the proof is in the pudding, right? Like, before the series started, I said, I think that, what Islanders a couple years ago, can you guys still hear me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry. What happened to them a couple years ago, they just got completely stifled by the system, which is really what the Islanders do to a lot of people, right? They counterattack them, they trap them to death, I think they figured their way around it. I give a lot of credit to Mike Sullivan for that. I think you go back and look at the regular season series, the Penguins won 6 of 8 games. Granted, they were close, but you didn't see symptomatically a lot of the same things that had killed them against the Islanders in the past. And I think the games themselves bore that out. Like, I think that you saw the Penguins have time and space where they didn't before. They had a lot more offensive opportunities. Their goaltending stunk. That's really it. And people don't want to hear
Yeah.
that. They don't want to hear that because they'll point to Jake Gensel. They'll point to Sidney Crosby's production. They'll say, well, you could have gotten there more there. But asking for more goals to me is covering up for how bad the goaltending really was, right? Like you don't need those extra goals if you get league average goaltending. And there's like a lot of advanced metrics in the goaltending world these days. And Tristan Jarry just so badly underperformed even what a league average goalie would have given the Penguins. I mean, we're talking like over 4-goal swing in performance just in that one sample of games. So it was decidedly bad. I think it stinks because the Penguins didn't lose that series because of the system. They didn't lose because the Islanders' style of play. They probably should have, gotten a little bit more out of the netminder. And there was no alternative. You're not going to turn to a guy who's played, they weren't going to go for another Jeff Zatkoff like miracle where you throw in the guy from the American Hockey League and hope Max Legacy can play above over his head for a couple games. They were going to ride with what they had. And if Casey DeSmith was healthy, you might even have to think a different outcome in that series. I don't think that's a stretch. So that goal against number is, I think, less about what the Penguins did defensively and how they approached the game, at 5-on-5, and more about just where their real major sort of kryptonite was in that series, and it was in net.
Yeah, it was definitely frustrating watching that series, knowing that we had figured out their system and we could score on their system, and that wasn't why we were losing this series. After years of being stuck with this, annoying, we couldn't get we figured them out and we couldn't get by it because of a lack of goaling. And you're right, it wasn't even that league average goal, a league average goalie would have helped us. It was below average, below replacement level. It was kind of an embarrassing performance. And honestly, that's the type of series that you see DeSmith get thrown in game 3 and play the rest of the series out. But we didn't have DeSmith. We had Legacy, and he's not even a great AHL level goalie. So Jarry would have been better than that. So it was just one of those, when you saw that the turnover Jarry had in overtime, where he just, or was it the end of the third or over, one of those weird things where he just completely gave up the puck right then and there. You knew that Jarry's is going to lose us this series. No matter, we could score 9 goals every game. We could get production out of Crosby, Gensel, Russ. We could get this crazy production, and Jarry's still going to lose us this series no matter what we do.
There was that. I guess there was probably the hope, though, right, that the opposite was going to happen, and he was going to lock it down and figure it out. And I just don't think that vibe was ever really given off. I don't think that to him it was that huge of a deal. It was playing the puck as a part of his game, and you overblow something like that. And I think, to me too, and it's a larger discussion to be had, if Mike Sullivan had any inkling that he was going to be in this exact situation right now during that series, he wouldn't have pulled Tristan Jarry either, because that's a confidence destroying thing, right? If you're taking your goalie out for a lifetime AHL player who, in the middle of the most important part of your season, you can't tell me that's not to some level mentally deteriorating for your goalie. And now, what do you know, right? This situation doesn't get addressed. You come back, he's still your starter. So I think Mike Sullivan was trying to think bigger, and there's life beyond this series. Of when we may still have to work with this kid, and I can't mortgage the future for right now. If he's going to be back in the same position, and maybe he knew, right? I don't know. Or at least I got to think that I partially have to think that was at least in the back of his mind a little bit.
I mean, I could see how that would have happened too. You bring him in, you replace him in that was his first playoff series. You replace him for some replacement level AHL guy, and he goes out and maybe you're right. Maybe Sullivan was onto something, because it does look like we're staring down the pipe of seeing DeSmith and Jarry rolling into camp now. And say you destroy Jarry's confidence, and you don't know where DeSmith is coming back because of injury. So this year would have been all up in the air if we had no goalies instead of at least the 2 we have. So maybe you're on to something there.
Well, here's the thing too. I don't even know that I know yet what Tristan Jarry's actual baseline performance looks like, right? You had that unbelievable run of form in the All-Star break or All-Star game, where his debut year, where it was just untouchable. And then it became very average. Then it was not average at all. It was under that. You probably had a little bit of average sprinkled in. So I still don't even really know, or I question whether or not any of us know what the baseline, like the sort of quote unquote, baseline test is for him. So it was, again, it was good enough last year. And I don't want to say the Penguins won the division because of him, because they did not, right? It was in spite of. But I mean, even if the baseline's a little bit higher than what you got last year, I think everybody can live with that. But it's that no goaltenders is supremely consistent. It's a volatile position. It's all over the place. It's subject to extreme levels of luck and randomness and strike at any time, right? But that being said, this is a little extreme. like you're taking a random position, a position that's prone to randomness, and Tristan Jarry is kind of taking it to a whole nother level. So this year, I think, will really be the I guess really the line in the sand for him, kind of, professionally, as to what happens next, right? I mentioned that there are a lot of teams that still believe he has value, but a performance similar to the one that we saw last year, probably that's tough to survive, right? From a reputation perspective. So this is, I think anyway, probably a significant make or break year for him.
See, and kind of pivot too, you can make the argument that this is kind of a make or break year for this entire team of, do we tear it up? Do we tear it down and start the rebuild, or can we compete for a couple more years coming up here?
Yeah, I think it probably too is for Mike Sullivan, right? And he got the vote of confidence from Ron Hextall, I think, in that he's still here, but there's no emotional attachment to Mike Sullivan from the staff, right? They didn't win a cup with him. That bond that you have doesn't exist. So I'm interested to see, how this is not a team that traditionally starts well. It's a veteran team that knows that it's an 82 game season, and what happens on Halloween probably is insignificant in the grand scheme of things, unless you miss the playoffs by a point. So the challenge for Mike Sullivan, I think, is always to keep a high level of engagement throughout the beginning of the year, which is why he runs, I think, a pretty brutal camp. That's a pivotal point to this for me, is that, how much leash does Mike Sullivan have? And what does that look like? And, that is, the winds and chains have been whipping about, and I think that that's one I'm probably keeping an eye on myself.
Well, you got to look too. Hextall is not really tied to pretty much anybody in this organization either. So I wouldn't be surprised if, say, the team's underperforming halfway through and he starts to sell off pieces on expiring contracts to try to rebuild some of this farm system. Because, I mean, in the grand scheme of things, Hextall was brought in, yes, because it was a strange situation with the GM changing over at a weird time of the year. But Hextall is looking at the pipe of, this contending team isn't going to be around for a while. He was brought in for this rebuild. And so you got to look at, when is he going to want to just pull the trigger, get a jump start on his rebuild, and do it on his own terms, instead of when it's kind of forced to him that the team isn't competing anymore. So I wouldn't be surprised either if he has a short lease with anybody and just starts selling pieces off if the team is underperforming. And I could see the team being in first place at the deadline. So this year is kind of just completely up in the air.
It is. And I'll tell you, the other thing is the pivotal word in all this is patience, right? And the reason he didn't keep his job in Philadelphia is probably because he was married to Dave Haxtell for a little bit too long. And that was a marriage that probably should have been ended sooner than it was. And then some of the decisions that he had to make with the team, tough decisions about where that franchise was going to go and the directions it was going to head. Jakub Voracek gets traded this year and not several years ago when Ron Hextall was there, right? So all this is to say, I talked to my colleague at The Athletic, Charlie O'Connor, who spent a lot of time with Ron Hextall, more than anybody else in the world probably during that period of time. And that was the first thing he said to me, is he goes, you got to watch, I think. And I think that's what was interesting, probably for me about the tenure, quote unquote, that he had. Because really the only thing he did was trade for Jeff Carter, right? I mean, that was it. I mean, that was the only significant move that he made. and if you think about all the stuff the Penguins were facing last year and all the directions the team was going and the injury situation and all the stuff he had to deal with, that's still a pretty patient approach, right? He didn't blow everything up for no reason. So that was what Charlie told me to keep an eye on was how long does his watch go now, right? Like what does his buffer zone look like? Knowing especially in this situation, the window to win is limited to a certain number of years. So, I think to your point, we'll have to watch. Does he hold on to some of these assets longer because he thinks they get him to that winning point? Or does he think that he's better off recouping other pieces for them and is willing to part ways with them quickly? I mean, there's any number of ways it could go. But that's the thing I always say to people with Hextall to keep in the back of your mind is things ended at his last job because of this, right? And now we're going to see how he reacts to it.
I actually have another question. This is actually a shocker. And this might have been a question that Caleb had. I'm not sure, but I'm going to ask it anyway. What is the biggest key for this Penguins team coming up this season for them to win the Stanley Cup? What is the biggest key for them?
Well, here's the thing. I think the roster composition of this team is going to be very good defensively. And this is a team that'll be able to play defense with anyone. They had Brock McGinn. Brock McGinn, he's not Brandon Tanev, right? They're two different players. But you're getting the defensive result that's very similar to having Brandon Tanev. Zach Aston Reese and Teddy Bluger are two of the best defensive hockey players from a forward perspective in the league. Brian Dumoulin. I think John Marino will be back next year. Marcus Pettersson, very good defensively. The question is, how many goals do you get out of the third and fourth line? And if push comes to shove and you get into a high-scoring affair, can that depth that you have on the third and fourth line be enough to tip the scale in your favor? Probably not earlier in the year, right? Because Jeff Carter is going to be your second-line center, and no knock on Jeff Carter. He's phenomenal. You're not going to have Evgeny Malkin, right? But with that three-man punch and Teddy Bluger behind them, I think the question is, can they keep up, or are they too top-heavy? Is there too much of a reliance on the Crosby line and the Malkin line to do all of the scoring? We have seen this Penguins team in some iteration before. The reality of the cap life is that you can fill that top six out nicely, but when push comes to shove, you're hoping that you strike lightning again with some kind of HBK combination, right? I think that was what really put the Penguins over the edge to win the cup, is that there was really a three-headed monster to pick your poison. That does not exist right now, I don't think. Maybe it does with Jeff Carter and the right combination of players, but the loss of Jared McCann, I think, makes the third line a little less potent. So now you've got to replace even more goal scoring, right? So I think that's really the question to me. They have to address the goalie. They maybe have to address goal. That's a big deal. Do you have the need? Where does the depth scoring slot in need? I don't know, right? But I think that's something to keep an eye on. We know that this team's, and I'm telling you now, no doubt in my mind, they're going to be good defensively. They're going to be very good defensively. Sidney Crosby alone is one of the best two-way defensive centers in the National Hockey League. People yell at me for being wrong about that all the time, but the proof's in the pudding. Go down the lineup. They got great defensive presences throughout it. The question is, can they score goals in the bottom six and on the second power play unit?
What was your thoughts on what they did with what happened with the expansion draft?
It was a tough situation, right? I was prepared, I think, to lose any one of Tanev, Bluger, or Zach Aston Reese. All three of them are really, really good, strong depth players. The signing of Bluger was a bargain. They're paying way less than they probably should, given the services he provides. I'm not shocked it was Brandon Tanev because of that contract. There's a couple extra years on the end. Brock McGinn, again, very different kind of player, but Brock McGinn saving you a couple bucks, right? And is a little bit more friendly in terms of age and how the rest of that contract plays out. So, I'm not shocked. I think the one thing I will say is that I didn't expect that they were going to have to suffer a cap casualty sort of in the mix of it with Jared McCann. But Philip Hollander is really good. Really good. He's good. he's the best prospect in the Penguins system now if you discount Pierre-Olivier Joseph, who I don't even really consider to be a prospect anymore because he's going to play in the NHL this year. So that helps quell the sting a little bit, but I guess I think everybody in Pittsburgh really had prepared to lose one player, right? We had all prepared for that. Losing two was not something we really initially thought was going to be possible. And think about what happened if they didn't. They only have $100,000 in cap space now. They'd be $3 million and change over if they hadn't traded McCann. So somebody had to go, right? But I think that was the shocking part about it. That kind of was like, oh crap, the numbers on the cap side are a little worse than everybody thought.
My question would be here next is, do you think that we can find a deal for Pettersson, or do you think we're going to stay put and keep Pettersson on the roster coming up into camp this year?
Well, I mean, I think it's good either way, right? Like Marcus Pettersson does his job very well. The problem is that job is limited to really, in my opinion, not letting people come by him with possession of the puck, that's the job of a defenseman, right? Like that's their whole job. That's you want them to do that. So he's very good at that. And he's very good at kind of safely getting the puck into the hands of his forwards. Everything else is just sort of like, there's nothing attractive there, So you need that presence on the team is my point, right? Like I think a lot of people sort of bemoan the fact that he's around and maybe he's paid a little bit too much, but I think you need players like that. By the same token, that's the reason why other people are going to see value in him as well, which makes him a movable piece. He's not super old. There's plenty of years of good hockey left in him. And really considering some of the contracts that got handed out this summer, his deal really isn't all that ridiculous. So I think all those elements combined sort of make him the most likely candidate defensively to be moved. And ultimately, again, is probably you're not losing a lot of impact in other areas, right? Like you're not relying on him for offense. You're not relying on him to be a presence on your second power play. So it's a little bit easier to swallow, I think, from a skill replacement standpoint.
And see, my thinking too is if we're going to get Pierre-Olivier Joseph up here at some point, that's 8 defensemen we have rolling into camp. Who do you see as making it? Say we don't make any moves. Who do you see of those 8 of Letang, Matheson, Marino, Dumoulin, Pettersson, Ruedel, Friedman, Pierre-Olivier Joseph? Who would you like? Would you roll with the 6 out of there and move some? Do you think they have some as depth pieces? Like I say, Arikula, who I guess we still have 2, so that's 9. Like we have a lot of people in that camp. And yes, I mean, injuries are a thing, but like Pettersson just seems like a person we could move out of that camp and be just fine. Especially with that deal.
I still think that they try to replace another defenseman so the reason I say this is because last year, they had played 11 by Valentine's Day, right? So that's a lot. That's like double, right? The amount you need. So I think they'd still probably try to address that position somewhere. By picking up a depth guy, maybe from on a 2-way deal, because I think they need it. I think they think that they need it. And that's a position they want an embarrassment of riches. So that's when I was saying, for them, it's if it happens, great. If it doesn't, great, because they're fine with this. Like, I don't think that they have any problem with, that's why they protected Mark Friedman. I think Ron Hextall especially thinks that Friedman has something to provide from that's yet to be seen. We'll find out. But I think that depth is important to them for sure.
Yep. And I mean, we saw how depth helped them in 16 and 17. So depth is like that. Everyone talks about Columbus having that 5th line of their fans, but the real 5th line is your depth, and that actually helps you win, unlike their fans.
Yeah, and I mean, again, you just look back at last year and what happened. As far as the injury crisis that occurred. I don't use that term lightly. To me, it's. You don't want to be in a situation where you have to sign Yannick Weber and have him drive to the game 5 hours beforehand and suit up. That's not ideal. It worked out great in that instance, but there's a level of pedigree discussion to be had there that I think they're looking for that is kind of provided by what they have in the system now.
Yeah, and it's not like Wilkes-Barre has much depth staring down them.
There's nothing
either.
Yeah, absolutely. Now beyond POJ, there you don't have anything defensively. Yeah, there's nothing down there. Forward will be where all the goods are.
Yep.
All right. Are you good, Caleb?
Yeah, I'm good.
All right.
I got through my list of questions here.
I got my questions that I came off off the dome with, but I
They
hope
were
I
good,
didn't
too.
embarrass myself too much.
No, man, like if you wouldn't have said anything at the start, I wouldn't have known. Like,
So, but yeah, thank you so much for coming on. It was obviously a pleasure to have you on, and hopefully we'll have you on again towards the season when it starts.
anytime, guys. I appreciate it and enjoy the football.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, you too, man.
All right,
Thanks, guys.
all right. We are going to take a quick break. We're going to get technical stuff going back in order, and then we'll be right back. So we'll be a couple seconds. So stay tuned and be right back. All right, welcome back. We just had to get the quick technical stuff back in order, but we are back. So obviously, Caleb was in his natural habitat of talking hockey, and I had no idea what the absolute hell was going on here. But yeah, it's gonna be fun. It's gonna be fun for me over the course of the year, learning about hockey, learning about the Penguins, learning about all that, and it's going to take me a little bit to learn, but I'm very excited to see. And I've always seen how rowdy and how crazy Penguins fans are. So hopefully I could get to the point where I'm like, all right, now I could join in on this. But I definitely want to get to a game this year. What game?
And I mean, the Penguins too are kind of looking in the same situation with excitement for the season as the Steelers are. I mean, we just came off of an early exit from the playoffs that really wasn't expected. We got like the window is coming to a close here with some of our like core players getting older. This is kind of do or die for the Penguins pretty much. So like this is another one that's like we're just kind of excited for this season to start, us as Penguins fans here. So you picked a good season to join the ride.
I'm very interested to see, and I'm interested to see whether, from what I was hearing, is it's one of those situations where you could see us being first, or you could see us start going down the cliff and start selling off pieces, and then the rebuild begins, or will start to begin. I'm hoping we could stay up here a little bit just so I can enjoy that a little bit. But if we start to go down here, well, then I get to start the process of watching a team being built early, I guess.
Yep. Hey, you could say you were there from the beginning, though, right?
Even though I told one of my friends who's also a big hockey person that I was rooting when I said I was looking for a new team because I wanted to get into hockey. One of my friends who is in the area, obviously he's a Columbus Blue Jackets fan. He was like, obviously you need to be a fan of the Blue Jackets. Well, then when I told him I was becoming a fan of the Penguins, he was like, oh, you bandwagon. I'm like, God, here we go.
Well, see, here's the thing. I still am under the impression that all Blue Jackets fans are bandwagon fans because they didn't know their team existed until about 3-4 years ago.
I mean, I always knew that they existed. I just didn't know anyone, and hell, I still don't know anyone on the team. So it's at least I knew Sidney Crosby. I knew that. So yes, I know I sound like a complete hockey noob, but I knew more Penguins players than I did Blue Jackets players. So we're up to something.
Well, I mean, it's not hard. The Blue Jackets have a bunch of nobodies who aren't any good at hockey. I'm just not a Blue Jackets fan, man. You don't get me started on this rant. Dude, the game that was scheduled the night that like the world shut down at the beginning of the COVID pandemic was Penguins versus Blue Jackets, and I was like excited for that game because like I can't stand the Blue Jackets and I just wanted to beat them. And we didn't play them this year, like because they postponed the rest of that season. We didn't play them in the playoff, like the return to play playoffs. We didn't play them last year because the way the divisions were structured, we only played our division. So it is like killing me that I still have not seen us. Like I'm still like ramped up and ready to go and watch us beat. Like every single time I see them play the Blue Jackets, I thoroughly enjoy watching them beat up on the Blue Jackets. It might be one of the best things in the world.
Interesting. Question for you. Switching real quick with the Pirates, as you being a Pirates fan, what is the team that you hate the most in Major League Baseball?
Ooh, Probably the Reds.
Interesting.
I either hate the Reds or it's the Cardinals. Or it's the Cubs. I don't know. Reds, Cardinals, and Cubs. It's just a toss-up every year. The Reds, because we had a lot of like fights and stuff.
You're right.
Yeah. And the Cardinals, just because it seems like we're always behind the Cardinals. And the Cubs, just because they're stupid. I don't like the Cubs.
Fun thing is, so I was actually, before I went to the game earlier, last month, I guess, the last baseball game that I went to was in 2019. It was at the Reds. It was at Great American Ballpark. It was Marty Brennaman weekend, because it was at the very end of the season, and they did a tribute for him, and it was really cool. And I always, I guess, had a tiny bit of a sweet spot for him, just because my mother, she was a big Cincinnati Reds fan growing up. She was from there, and it was, so I always had a little something for him. And what's funny is it sounds like I'm actually going to Wrigley Field later this year, so I'm interested to see how that goes. I'm happy about that. And then the team that I saw the Reds face in that game is another stadium we're planning on going to, is actually Milwaukee.
Okay.
So and then I get to go and see my division rival for my Cleveland Guardians, whatever you want to call them, the Minnesota Twins. So that, even though they just had a
Twins in there,
they just had a complete fire sale.
I was gonna say the Cubs too. They just sold off.
They sold everyone. It was insane what happened, because they sold off Javier Baez. They sold off Anthony Rizzo. You sold off Craig Kimbrell, like Chris Bryant.
Yeah.
They are,
and they weren't that far out of it either. That's why it doesn't make sense. And I understand maybe moving one or two of those pieces, but like the Javi Baez thing, I'd have kept on to him. Like,
yeah, and I mean, it's very, and I think part of it too was because of the fact that that Francisco Lindor and the Mets really wanted Javier Baez on that team, and that infield with those two, that's defensively pretty sick.
Well, then you got Pete Alonso at first base too, so.
A nickname that I almost said that I will not say because, well, that's not very appropriate. If you know, you know. But why the hell are we talking baseball? We have a football game that's going to be going on in less than an hour and a half. We get to finally watch football.
Finally.
We get to finally watch. We get to finally go, and I'm trying to find the words. I am so excited. Everyone in the comments, I want everyone share this video, retweet this on Twitter, all that. I want all the Steeler fans. I want everyone to see this. I want you guys to get hyped. I don't care if it's a Hall of Fame game. I don't care if it's a preseason game. You better stand up. I want you to wave your terrible towels. Yes, I have a brand new terrible towel. You better start waving them things. You better get hyped. This is the begin. Hopefully, this is going to be a great year. I know a lot of people are doubting us. A lot of people are saying that we're going to be absolute dog crap. Everyone's saying that Ben Roethlisberger is going to fall off the face of the earth, and that his arm is completely going to fall off, and he's going to have to learn how to throw with his left arm. But needless to say, because a bunch of people on Twitter and a bunch of media members like to try to play this little game, and they did this last year as well. And how did that work out for you? We ended up going 12-4 and winning the division. Yes, I know. Cleveland Browns fans, 48-37. Yes, that's the first time you've finally been able to say something in your life, because most of you guys that I know, we have more Super Bowl wins than you guys do playoff appearances. So first off, we are still the daddy of the division, so thank you very much for that.
Kings of the North,
whatever you want to call us. And all I have to say too is Ben Roethlisberger, and I know this is going to shock some people because of the way I've been talking, and I know I've been saying I've had my words, but the hell with it. Today, Ben Roethlisberger is going to go out there, or not tonight because he's not playing, but he's going to go out there week 1 against Buffalo, and he's going to show the world that you guys and a bunch of the media members who decided to clown on him, or he's actually going to clown on you because he's going to show that he does still have some arm strength and this offense is going to run very well. And I can't wait for you guys to shut the hell up and finally make it look like he's going to make you look like a fool. As you can tell, my English is very bad right now because I don't know what the hell I'm saying. But you're excited. You're excited. The goal for me is I'm trying to get you guys excited. I want to get you guys hyped. If we had the rights to do it, I'd start playing Renegade right now. I'll probably play it on repeat the rest of the show, because that is how we're feeling. And at some point, when we get the ability to do that, we're gonna start doing it. We're just gonna start playing Renegade every week, and it's gonna be a hell of a time. But
dude, we could just not talk the second half of the show. Just play Renegade on a loop.
We're just gonna play Renegade all. It's good. Revolution Radio, home of where you can hear Renegade Renegade Roundtable and Renegade by Sticks for a half hour. But
no, I mean, how can you not get hyped for this game? This could be a practice, like a scrimmage. It's the Cowboys. We don't like the Cowboys.
Listen,
this is going to be fun to beat the Cowboys. It could be a scrimmage, and I would be hyped to play the Cowboys.
Listen, remember in 2008, the year that the Steelers won Super Bowl number 6, when Mike Tomlin, second-year coach, was talking, and I know this is a different team, but the Baltimore Ravens, he was like, this game would be big as ever if this was a scrimmage, but it's the AFC title game. That's how it is with all Steeler fans in this game. We finally get to watch football. We finally get to, well, first off, for some people who are praying for the downfall of Mason Rudolph, which I guess if that's how you feel, then that's how you feel. I think it's kind of clownish for you to bash on someone. Well, not let me say bash, but basically prey on someone's downfall, which is what some Steeler fans are doing to Mason Rudolph. I don't get why. We get to see Dwayne Haskins. We're going to see him towards the end of the second half, and we get to see Josh Dobbs. Molly, I know if you're watching this, you're welcome. I brought up Josh Dobbs, and if not, someone clip this, send this to her, and she could get happy. But I love you. I love you, Molly. I'm just messing with you. But yeah, we get to see this. We get to see some of the younger guys. We get to see the offensive line work, because from what we have heard from camp, they have been absolutely atrocious. But my thought point on that is, okay, the offensive line not be good right now. Well, first off, we've been expecting this. Well, at least I have. I've been expecting them. I said from the beginning, I had worries about the offensive line. It's going to take them a little bit of time to grow and gel and gain that chemistry. But we still get to see them grow. And what better way to get better if you're a young offensive line than going up against arguably the best defense in the NFL? That's how I look at this. It is a regular... Oh, that's you. But yeah, it's a... And Stone says we play them this season. Who are we talking about?
She's talking about the Blue Jackets.
Oh. But we get to see the offensive line. I'm happy about that. I'm happy to see what Dwayne Haskins does, because I want to see how he's going to look out there. He hasn't had the greatest of careers. Part of it was because of the situation he was in Washington. That was an absolute clown shoot of a situation that he was in. Let's see if some of his mechanical stuff, if he's worked on, we'll see what those look like. I want to see, his decision making, because that was kind of an issue as well. And I'm just interested to see some of the young guys, some of the back end of the depth chart kind of guys, and see those guys fighting for jobs, fighting for spots. And regardless if they get obliterated or if they go out and just dominate, all that stuff right now does not matter. A, we get to watch football again, and B, most of this preseason stuff is for the back end guys. And I understand that we're technically learning a new offense. Not necessarily, because Matt Canada had something to do with the offense last year. So this is not like a situation where they're going in and learning an absolute brand new offense. And in this case, having that extra preseason game here would be great. But right now, it's just kind of, getting some of the newer guys up to speed, I'm interested to see how Najee Harris looks. I'm very excited. There's a lot of stuff that I'm looking into with this game.
Yeah, I'm excited to see how Rudolph and Haskins perform, because that's like the one position battle I'm looking at. And even though it's for the second string, I'm still looking at to see who gets that job, the second string job rolling into the regular season.
Right now, if you're looking at the situation that we are in, that backup quarterback job is actually very important. Because although I just got you guys hyped up about Ben Roethlisberger and how I think he's going to go out there, and how people have been saying that's been at camp, saying that his arm strength, that people were questioning, people need to stop because he could still sling the rock. But we do have to take into consideration that, yes, he is getting old. He does have that and with this offensive line, there is the chance that something could happen, and you want to have trust in your backup quarterback. But not only that, these are also two quarterbacks that could be the quote unquote future. So we don't know what's happened, because look at what happened with Ben Roethlisberger when he got drafted in 2004, when Tommy Maddox got hurt. Then he comes in and then he just takes the NFL by storm, goes 15-1. Obviously, they get obliterated by the Patriots in the AFC title game. They end up going to the Super Bowl, winning 3 or 4. We all know that. But we don't know what, and I hope that doesn't happen. I hope we don't have to see any of those guys playing this year, unless it's a situation where we just completely obliterated the opponent and they're just trying to protect Ben Roethlisberger at that point. But this is very important, and this is something that we need to watch out for. Right now, is from what it seems, Mason Rudolph is the backup guy, but that definitely can change. And if he goes out there today, doesn't play well, but then Dwayne Haskins goes out there and throws a couple nice balls and looks like he could run the offense, now things will get very interesting, and the headlines are going to become that much more interesting.
Yeah, and you got to remember, too, Haskins and Rudolph performed about the same in regular season when they both played for their respective last appearances. The year Ben was hurt, when Rudolph played those couple of games before he was hurt, and then with Haskins with his year in Washington. But the difference was it was us, and we were a better caliber team, and then it was Washington, who was a rebuilding team at best. Right. So I'm interested to see this battle, because like you said, it is the future quarterback, because we don't have anybody else on the roster right now. It doesn't look like they're picking anybody high. It doesn't look like we're going to get a top 5 draft pick this year. So unless we trade up with it, and if something happens to Ben at the end of this year, like we're all saying, one of these two guys, there's a real good chance is going to start next season for the Steelers. And it starts right now to see who's going to take that spot.
Now, one thing that I saw that definitely caught my eye was that the Rooney family talked about how they wouldn't shut the door on Ben Roethlisberger coming back next year. Now, I have an issue with that. Now, if he could go out there and play like the Ben Roethlisberger we know, and he does Ben Roethlisberger things, then I'll address that at the end of the season. But I don't necessarily like that, because at that point I feel like we're starting to that's a situation of you're kind of hindering, we'll call it a retool. It's not a rebuild, but a retool. And at that point, all it is maybe is just switching out quarterbacks. A couple pieces here and there, maybe trying to upgrade the offensive line. We don't know what's going to happen with that, because and we don't know. And I've been saying this since the very first episode. There are so many scenarios that could go on with the quarterback position. And I'll say it again. We don't know if there's a guy that they like next year's draft class that they like. I don't necessarily see a guy that, because the quarterback class next year is just not that good. Is there a bridge guy? Or maybe do they use Ben Roethlisberger as that bridge guy? We don't know. Do they have that much faith in Dwayne Haskins or Mason Rudolph? Right now, going into the season, it was sounding like Mason Rudolph, But with the reports that we've been hearing from camp, it's not looking good for him. He has looked abysmal. So there is so many questions with that. And I know we have to let's enjoy this season because for all intents and purposes, this is most likely Ben Roethlisberger's last year. And I want to enjoy that. I want to, I guess, as a Guardians fan, I got to hear this with Francisco Lindor where we have to enjoy him. But in this case, we know the time is almost here for Ben Roethlisberger, and it's going to suck. Most of us in the chat and between you and me, all we know is Ben Roethlisberger at quarterback. That's all we know. Yeah. It's kind of like, I guess, how New England fans were feeling with Tom Brady, where most of their fans, all they knew were Tom Brady at quarterback, and then you don't have him anymore. You're like, well, what the hell do we do here? What the hell's going on? I thought he was going to be here my whole life. I thought he was immortal. I thought he was Terminator.
We had that 1 year of Rudolph and Duck Hodges, which make us appreciate Ben Roethlisberger even more.
Right, but I think also what helped was the defense. The defense really went out there and took that next step from 2018 where because 2017, we know the defense was trash. They were terrible. But then 2018, they make improvements. And I think the biggest part of that was the fact that when Bud Dupree and TJ Watt, they switched sides where Bud Dupree was on the blind side now. I think that was a big help with that. And we saw, and then 2019, they took that next step again, and they became a top defense in the NFL. And I think part of that, too, was the fact that they drafted Devin Bush, who was able to go out there, and I guess, I hate to use the word replace because of what happened with Ryan Shazier, but it was, in a way, he did replace Ryan Shazier with the same kind of speed that you needed, the same kind of speed that we were used to with Ryan Shazier. So we went out and helped that again, and it was nice to see the defense and us going back to know for what we're known for is a great defense, and with the addition of Najee Harris, hopefully being able to get the run game. Hopefully it's smash mouth football and destroy you on defense.
Mm-hmm.
That is what I'm looking for.
Yeah, I'm just like hyped for the whole thing, man. This season seems like it's going to be something great here, right? And this just seems like the start of it. Even though it's a preseason game, there's just so much going on. It's like we talked about in past weeks, it's the most excited we've been for a Steelers season in a long time. And then that starts with preseason. Mm-hmm. Then preseason games are massively important because it decides position battles. It's deciding the future. Like, this is going to be the first time in a long time where I'm going to be like dying to know the scores of the preseason game, dying to know the results, who did well. I'll watch the highlights. In years past, I mean, I can admit I didn't really care that much for the preseason because we all knew who was going to start. But this just seems like the year where I want to see how Haskins and Rudolph play out. I want to see the position battles on the O-line. I want to see the way the defense gels together with the new inputs they have this year. I want to see what happens this year in preseason. And I'm just excited for the season all around. And it starts tonight. It starts in about an hour.
Yeah, and a lot of what you said is exactly it. Where for the most part, we typically knew who was going to be starting for us. Maybe here or there was a new job open. Mm-hmm. But between the last couple of years, well, I would say last year and especially this year, it's the first time in a little bit where we've seen actual position competition at certain positions. We're caring about what's going on with the backup quarterback job, where before we were typically just used to it being either for a couple of years Mason Rudolph or before that Landry Jones, and we've had quality backup quarterbacks that could go out there, and if Ben Roethlisberger were hurt, you have a guy that you can trust for a couple games, and you have that. Like you said before, the offensive line, I'm very interested to see how they look and how they're going to start to gel because quite frankly, you look at 2-3 years ago, there's no one on this offensive line that was on the offensive line 3 years ago. This is pretty much a brand new group. It's a new beginning. And I know offensive line isn't sexy. I know it's not something that some people care about. And maybe the casuals, all they care about is the offense. But if you really know football, you're really looking at this as this is a very important. It's very important for Ben Roethlisberger and his health, because we saw what happened last year with the offensive line. It went downhill, and the offense went downhill. Now we have that. I'm interested, and that will help affect the run game. We'll see what Najee Harris is like, because I'm very interested to see how he looks, not only just running the football, but in pass protection, how he looks coming out of the backfield in this offense. The wide receiver core, that's pretty much staying the same. I don't know what the latest was on Pat Freiermuth. I know he got hurt. What was it, a couple days ago? I don't know if someone.
I don't know if he's playing tonight. I wasn't able to see anything in either direction. I would assume he wouldn't be.
Right, but that's a guy that I'm watching out for. I'm interested to see what he's doing. And then on the defense, the defensive line is the same. I'm very excited to see what happens with Alex Highsmith, as we interviewed Sam Highsmith last week, the father of Alex. I'm very excited to see how he goes with this Melvin Ingram, the secondary too. How is Cam Sutton going to look? He's taking a bigger role now. So there is a lot to look forward to, and I'm very excited for this.
Yeah, it's going to be a really, really fun preseason. It's going to be shaping up into what could be a really fun year, and it starts tonight,
Right.
I hate to keep saying the same thing, but it's like this is a meaningful preseason. It's a meaningful, even camp this year was fun to watch. Mm-hmm. And I feel like we've had a lot more fans up and close this year, with it being how we didn't have camp last year that fans could attend. And so we didn't have this preseason last year. So it seems like people care a lot more about this preseason and this camp than they did last year's camp.
Mm-hmm.
Because, not saying that if we had a camp last year, they would have cared about last year's camp, because it would have been the first thing back. But we haven't had this camp. We haven't had preseason in now, 2 years now? So this is just, we had camp, but fans can attend. So there's a lot of buzz around it this year. And it's just, it seems like they're in Steeler Nation, there's a lot of buzz around this preseason. So, and this season too. So we're not the only ones who are overly ecstatic for this season.
Yeah.
And overly ecstatic for this preseason and the game that starts tonight, because we're going to beat the Cowboys.
And not only that, it's the fact that we get to see the last 2 year, between last year and this year, the Hall of Fame class. We get to see our Troy Polamalu, Donnie Shell, Alan Faneca, and Bill Cowher, and if I'm forgetting someone, I apologize, but we get to see those guys, which, by the way, in 2 years, the Browns still don't have anyone inducted in the Hall of Fame, so...
Shocker.
How about that, Browns fans? But we get to see that, so there's a lot of... It's funny, too, that Steeler fans are going to probably take over the state of Ohio with that. I guarantee you there is a lot of Steeler fans at the Hall of Fame game. If you are there, have fun, but be safe. I know COVID is starting to go on the rise again. So if you are out there, just be safe, and you know what to do. But other than that, all I got to say is, here we go.
Yeah.
We get football. And I would assume about an hour and 15 minutes, technically an hour.
Technically an hour. In fact, the pregame stuff starts at 7?
7:30, somewhere in that range.
Somewhere in there, the pregame show is on Fox, so we get pregame football coming up here soon.
Oh yeah, and apparently I am involved in a Steelers show Zoom, so I'll be doing that during the game. So I'll have that going for me. And obviously, if you want, go ahead, follow us on Twitter. Obviously, and then you can also add Stone on Twitter at A Dark Knight on Twitter. As I don't know how much Caleb you're going to be doing in terms of tweeting during the game. I know I'm going to be going nuts. Because Caleb,
to be honest, I'm probably not going to tweet a single thing during the game. You know what? Just for you, Jeff, I'm going to tweet some stuff during this game.
Please do it. I love it. I love when you tweet.
I feel like I've only tweeted, like I retweet a ton of stuff, but I feel like I've only made like 5 or 6 tweets ever that actually have my content. So you know what? For you, I'm going to put that, approximately my 7th tweet out tonight. Just for you, Jeff.
Hey, number 7. You're going to put your 7th tweet out there for Ben Roethlisberger, number 7. We're going to win Super Bowl number 7. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. It was an absolute hell of a show. Thank you again for Jesse Marshall coming on with us, talking some Penguins. And I hope y'all have a great evening. I know y'all will because we get to watch Steeler football. Peace out.